What if you could start making your own sci-fi films and action scenes at a fraction of the time? Well, now you can, using motion capture. Believe it or not, any one of you can start using motion capture and start making Hollywood-level films just like this from home, saving you hundreds of hours and getting better results than having to painstakingly keyframe everything yourself. I've spent the last decade working in Hollywood visual effects, and the last 2 years making animated films in Unreal Engine. But it wasn't until I made the samurai sword fight that I was able to bring my own sci-fi action scenes to life faster than ever. So in this video, you'll learn all the shortcuts in my exact process to go from an idea to final animation, even if you're not an animator yourself. You'll see just how streamlined this workflow is and why motion capture isn't just for big studios anymore. It's now a tool that all of us filmmakers can actually use.
Now, the traditional way of making animated films is you start with a storyboard, then you make your previs, and then you make the final result. And each step uses a different software. But with Unreal Engine 5, we can go from storyboard to previs to final result while working in real time. And that's what we're gonna cover today. So before we dive in, let's watch this breakdown of how Halon Entertainment approaches previs with filmmaking in mind.
So basically, it's like watching a movie before you actually make the movie. Previs is really just a way for the director and everybody that's involved in a production to come up with an agreement on what they would like to do. The great thing about using Unreal is that it looks so good that it gives them a really good sense of what the eventual movie is going to be like.
There's a reason that I love previs and I love this development process. This is where the movies get made.
We really have to concentrate more on the story and your composition. Those are the things that are going to hold your audience.
Does the emotion work, and are you engaged? And if you're engaged when it looks like a video game, it's only going to be that much better when it's live action.
So in this lesson, we'll cover the 4 stages that every motion capture production goes through. We'll start with an overview and then dive into each step. And it all starts with the build. Start out by collecting inspiration and building your film sets and environments along with your 3D characters. The second step is motion capture, where you'll work with actors together on set to create a real performance, and then you'll need to clean up your motion capture data to get a clean animation. Then we'll start the filmmaking cycle. This is when you set up your cameras, assemble your first edit, and then improve the animations through the camera lens. Then you can decide what parts of your motion capture you need to improve and upgrade, which is super easy when you have a control rig. And lastly, when your edit is locked, we'll move on to lighting and effects, and we'll add in the finishing touches and composite our renders to make them look photoreal. Let's talk about building and sourcing your 3D characters. In our case, we started from an existing 3D model to save us some time on the first version and start right away with a rig. But we did make some major changes to the 3D model by creating a custom helmet to match the original concepts and references, and we completely replaced the materials and textures and created our own in Substance Painter. Now, most people skip over this super important step, look development. Once you've created your textures in Substance Painter, your character isn't done just yet. You need to preview your characters under real lighting conditions, and we want to stress test the materials to make sure they'll hold up under any situation. The easiest way to do this is to create a turntable. Put your character in the middle and set up some lights, and rotate your asset around by 360 degrees so you see every side of your object. Then do a second pass where you rotate the lights. This will start to reveal if anything looks artificial or fake in your materials. And if there's anything not looking right, just continue adjusting your textures and materials until it looks true to life. Next, let's talk about motion capture and what it takes to get great results yourself. Now, there's many different options for motion capture, ranging from completely free by just using your webcam or your iPhone, all the way to dedicated motion capture studios, which are tens of thousands of dollars per day. But if you're on an indie budget, I would recommend Rococo. It's what we used to shoot the motion capture for this short. And we used Rococo smart suits and smart gloves to capture the performance for our sword fight. Now, why I went with Rococo is that we could capture 2 suits at the same time. And by using their smart gloves, we could actually get hand animation, which can be pretty tricky and time consuming to do yourself, especially with characters holding swords and weapons. Now, if you want to jump into the action and make your own sci-fi films yourself, Rococo is awesome enough to give every one of you watching this video a discount store-wide. Just use coupon code UNREALVFX at checkout, and you'll get an extra 5% off your entire order. I'll leave a link down below for the bundle we used on this exact project. Now, if you're using a Rococo system on set, all of the data is transmitted from the suits directly into Rococo Studio, and it's connected by using a Wi-Fi router. Now, we're not using that for internet. Modern day routers are insanely fast at sending data between devices. The easy way to get started in Rococo Studio is by creating an actor profile for each actor wearing a smart suit. Here you can enter in the height for your actors and pick whether they're male or female body types, and you can specify any measurement so your skeleton perfectly matches your actor. We created our 2 actor profiles, and then when we created a new project, you simply add these actors into your scene and you connect your smart suit and smart gloves. We started every single take by having one of our actors clap their hands so we could align the motion capture data with the video and audio tracks. And to keep things organized, we created a folder for each setup and a take number for each attempt. In between each take, we would recalibrate our motion capture suits to get the best results possible. Just press the recalibrate button at the top of Rococo Studio, and your actors just need to stand still with their hands by their side for 3 seconds. So here's some raw behind the scenes footage to take a look at how every take would start.
Yeah, we're on a take 4. Okay, and recalibrating. And mocap rolling.
And then we would start recording each performance. And you get an immediate result, and you can tell whether it's going to work or not. This simple naming process really kept things organized and simple at the same time. On set, we also had a live action camera capturing reference footage at all times. This way, we always had footage to look back at so we know what was really happening in real life in case there were any errors in our motion capture. Now, if you want your shoot to go smoothly, you need to anticipate all the problems that could happen beforehand. One issue we faced is after 1 hour or so of recording, Rococo Studio would slow down and our characters would stutter. This is no time to panic. The easy fix for most of these issues is simply restarting every part of your workflow. In our case, I just had to restart my laptop itself, but I went through the entire chain by restarting my laptop, the router, and all the Rococo suits to make sure everything was working correctly. When troubleshooting, you're really just trying to find that one broken link in the chain. And another pro tip is to bring batteries. You'll want an external battery to make sure these suits last as long as possible so you can keep recording throughout an entire day. Now, before we export this data out of Rococo Studio, there's one step that most people skip over, which totally ruins their motion capture data. And that's because you need to do a pass of motion capture cleanup before we export our animation. Here in the timeline, if you look on the very right side, you can add filters onto the animation data. And we use these 3 filters every single time. The first one is locomotion. Now, this filter isn't just important, I would say it's absolutely necessary. And to see this in action, I'm gonna press on this little gizmo button so I can preview these filters in the viewport. If I zoom in closer here, these green and blue bars are telling Rococo when our actors' feet are planted on the ground. If I zoom in here a little bit closer by expanding on this timeline, let me press play, and you can see the different feet activate when they're planting on the ground. Now, the more accurate you can be with this, the more accurate your motion capture will be. This green bar right here is signaling that our left foot is planted on the ground. If I scrub back and forth here, I can actually see that our left foot begins to drift left and right, and that's because we don't have the blue bar active when it should be. So if I drag this blue bar to the right, and then I press on Process Changes, that reduces the drift on our back foot. Now, don't worry, this isn't a fully manual process. Rococo will do its best guess and do a first pass at placing the left and right feet. You just want to go through the entire timeline and make sure it's accurate and adjust each step by dragging these bars left and right. If you don't do this, your feet won't be firmly planted on the ground and your characters will be slipping left and right like they're on an ice rink, and it's totally unconvincing when you bring that data into Unreal. If I want to switch between characters, I can just use these tabs on the bottom left by switching between HPW, which is our yellow character, or our blue character, and we can preview the gizmos for our filters there. Now, the next most helpful filter is Drift Fix. If I preview this gizmo, this tool is really easy to set up. You're just going to define the start and end position of your character to help nudge our characters into the right world space. Now, Rococo suits are using sensors inside of the motion capture suit to capture the speed and rotation of each joint. High-end motion capture systems will use cameras so that all of the data and characters it's capturing all share the same exact 3D world. Now, we don't get that advantage with Rococo, and that's why we can adjust the start and end positions to change the trajectory of our character.
Now in our case, the way we made this super simple is that we started each take with our characters standing left and right of one another. And we use our reference footage to make sure we're starting our Rococo models in the right 3D space. Again, if you need to adjust this, you can just change that start position by dragging it left and right and pressing Process Changes. The rest of the filters are helpful for smoothing out your data, like reducing the toe bend with the toe bend filter, or by using the foot IK system to recalculate your legs, which might give you a better result. Then, once you've processed all your changes and you've watched through and have some great motion capture data, that's when we can start to export our animations. To do that, just go on the bottom right and we can use the exporter. And we'll export our data as an FBX file with all the data included, and we can select what skeleton we want. Now, if you use the Mixamo skeleton, you can automatically use the one-click control rig with your character. Otherwise, you can use the Rococo Newton skeleton, and your frames per second is set by your project. Then just press export. Then you just have to go through every single take, which it does add up, it can take a while, but it's totally worth it because we'll get clean, accurate motion capture data ready to use inside of Unreal. Then you can import your animations and the Rococo character itself into Unreal. The first thing I did was I took the Rococo animations and I put them inside of the environment. Then I would add a sword onto the character and set up a camera so I could start thinking of new angles and interesting shots even with this basic character. But if you want to transfer your Rococo animations onto your character, the next step is retargeting. We need to retarget the animations from our Rococo rig to our character rig. So I imported all of my characters and animations into Unreal, including the Rococo skeleton and character, and then I created retargeting assets for both characters. This way I could preview all those animations on our samurai characters. And even before we had our finished model and our finished textures, I could preview the animations on the final rig. Now, once our motion capture is imported and we've done our first pass of retargeting animations, that's when the filmmaking cycle begins, where we'll start creating cameras and rendering out shots, then dropping those into our edit, and then jumping right back into Unreal to adjust and animate our characters and camera. And we'll do this for every single take that has an interesting performance. Now, the goal at this stage isn't just to look at your motion capture data, it's to assemble your first edit. In filmmaking, if you don't have an edit, you don't have anything. We need to build a timeline with video and audio, and the way to do that is to render out our motion capture data through a camera. So the typical setup is I would add both characters into Sequencer, then I would find motion capture performances that are interesting and assign those takes onto each character and align them in the center of my environment. Then I would create multiple cameras with different focal lengths. Typically, I'll create at least one wide shot, which would have a focal length of 20 to 40 millimeters, and then I would create a close-up for each character, and for the lens, use something between 50 and 150 millimeters. Then I'd try to find one special moment and create a camera just for that. Maybe there's a sword swing with lots of weight and momentum, and when you're zooming around in your 3D world as you let your animations play, it's really easy to get inspired and find new camera compositions and ideas on the fly. Then I would use look-at tracking so your camera can always follow the action. The goal here isn't to have a perfect camera move right away. It's to get your first camera move so you can make your first render and block in your movie in your editing timeline. The one pro tip is I always try to picture what it would take for a real camera person to hold a heavy camera on set. And I try to imagine how you would have to pull this off in real life. As soon as you start moving your camera too fast or in unrealistic ways, it's the fastest way to take your audience out of your film. Then I would load all these up into Movie Render Queue and render out all of these sequences using the PlayBlast QuickTime preset to make fast renders that render out as a .mov file that I can drop directly into an editing timeline. With this preset, you can render long takes that are 30 seconds or a few minutes long, and it shouldn't take that long to render. You can always lower your output resolution as well if you want an even faster render too. Another pro tip is you can add a burn-in, which is just some text that you'll include in your render. That would include data like the frame number or the name of your sequence.
This will make it really easy to jump back and forth between your edit and your level sequences in Unreal. All you need to do is add this burden option to your render configs, and this will automatically be added to your renders. Then once you've rendered out a couple of takes, we can take all of those renders into your editing software, like Adobe Premiere or Resolve. Now again, the reality is you don't have a film until you have a timeline with video and audio together. And that's why our goal is to get there as fast as possible. Now, because we rendered out these really long takes, when we drag in our renders, it's just like getting footage from on set. You can bring in each take, watch through the footage, and clip out any selects or highlights from the cool moments that you see, and assemble the best ones together. And it's super important to bring in basic music and sound effects as early as possible too. In our case, we were making a music video, so we had a soundtrack that we could start pacing our shots to. Now, I never expect this first version to be perfect. It's just your first draft. But once you find some camera movement that you're happy with, and you find a nice flow and pace to your film, you can jump back into Unreal and make adjustments, where we'll improve our animation, or come up with new ideas and adjust our animation. Once you've decided on the right camera moves and frame ranges, we can lock our edit and improve our animation and motion capture inside of Unreal by using control rigs, using the same exact workflow we used before. We'll start out with our animation clips, and then we would right-click on our asset and bake this animation onto a control rig. Then we'll use additive tracks and the curve graph editor to perfect our animation. And then the cycle continues. Keep watching your edit and update your cameras and character animation until you have a version of your edit that has the right pace and flow between each shot. At this stage, just focus on the composition and the flow across your entire film. Once everything is locked, only then should you move on to the next step, lighting and effects. It's important to save this step until the end, and I honestly wouldn't worry about lighting or effects whatsoever until you have a first draft of your edit. Lighting will change the mood of your film, but ultimately it won't change the story. So there's no point in lighting before the camera and animation has a great first pass, because if you end up moving the camera, your lighting will look totally different. At any point, you can press play and drag your lights across your scene, and I really like this method of finding new ideas and new lights in a really interactive way. And from this point forward, filmmaking in Unreal is a very iterative process. Keep improving your shots and improving your film one version at a time. On War of Being, we didn't finish our character assets until the very end. We continued updating the cloth, the helmet, and physics assets as we went. And anytime there was an error in our render, we would update that physics assets, and now we have the improved version for the next shot too. And when you go to make your final renders, the only thing that changes in the end is you'll increase your render settings and use a higher quality render preset, and finish off your visual effects shots by compositing your final image by using the one-click compositing template. So that's the entire workflow when making films and animations with motion capture. Even if you use another mocap system other than Rococo, the workflow will stay the same once you load all your animations into Unreal. So keep these steps in mind and use this workflow as you're planning your next film. If you want to jump into the action and make your own sci-fi films like this yourself, Rococo is awesome enough to give every one of you watching this video a discount store-wide. Just use coupon code UNREALVFX at checkout and you'll get an extra 5% off your entire order. So if you're new to Unreal or you've struggled learning it in the past, don't worry. I'll give you my entire filmmaking toolkit inside of Unreal Fundamentals, my course that'll take you from a complete beginner to making your own sci-fi films and action scenes in Unreal 5. It's on sale right now at unrealforvfx.com/fundamentals. Otherwise, press subscribe down below and click here to go behind the scenes and see how we tackle the lighting and environments for the samurai sword fight step by step. I'll see you next time. Peace.